frequency distribution is just how often something occurs out of a list of things that can occur. Right? These are color cars. How many cars are green? How many are black? How many are red? How many are blue? Right? These are categorical or qualitative variables. It's red. It's black. Right? It's a name. And you and I may not agree on the color red, but it's in the table. Right? The ones that are more useful are frequency by number. Like number of pets. How many people have a dog, have a cat? So on. And there can be overlap, we don't know. But this is just 16 people have one pet. 21 have two. 14 have three. In these things, there are other frequencies that we can make from the basic frequency. So we're going to do the basic frequency, and then we can elaborate on it. So I'm going to get the Excel assignment. This is the same one we had before. Where'd it go? I got to go back one. Yeah, here it is. Get the Excel assignment that we had before. And this is the frequency distribution we're going to make. So, download that file again. And this is the same one we did the pie chart and the bar chart. And this is the frequency distribution page. Okay, you got it? See it there? Right. These are classes. When you have numbers, it's not like the pets, where there was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They're numbers. But when we're looking at something like this is low temperature in Blacksburg in February. And if we listed it by individual degrees, all we get is a bunch of ones and zeros. So it's better to have it in groups, right? And these here are called the class limits. So anything from 0 to 9 goes into class 1. Anything from 10 to 19 goes into class 2. Right? And the way Excel handles these things is that it only concerns itself with the upper limit of the class that it calls bins. So that in this one, anything that is bigger than 9 in Excel goes into this class. So the bin is the absolute upper boundary. And we can have boundaries outside of this. If we have temperature to 1 decimal place, we can break it into those groups. The boundary can be 9.5 as the upper end. And anything 9.5 and below goes into the 0 to 9. Anything from 19.5 goes into the next one. All right, so there's class limits and class boundaries. And the boundaries get a little particular, but all they are is the absolute upper end of our class. All right, the deal here is the frequency command. Let's take these limits, and I'm going to copy them and just put them somewhere where we can deal with them without screwing up the rest of it. These are called bins in Excel, and it is the upper end of what our classes are going to be. So in this one, the bins, anything bigger than 9 goes to 10. 9 is the absolute limit. 19 is the absolute limit. To do the frequency, pick a spot beside the 9 and mark all those places. All right, then without doing anything else, do equals and FRE. Equals, every command starts with an equal sign, FRE, and frequency is the only command that Excel has that starts with FRE, so it brings it up. You can type in frequency and put a paren in, or you can double-click on the suggestion. So if you just go to frequency and double-click, and it gives you instructions on what command it's going to use, what data it's going to use. All right, so it says first, what is the data array? And our data array is the temperature from 1958. Just mark the data. Just go to the first, push the mouse button down, and mark it just like you would anything else in Excel. Then here, in our frequency, it's got our data array. Then the next part, we need a comma, and then it wants the bins array. And these are going to be the bins. This is the 9, 19, and so forth. And you mark those. Now we've got the data marked, the bins marked, close the parenthesis, and this is where different versions of Excel confuse themselves. If you've got an old Excel, you have to use a particular command. Newer Excel, you just press enter. So if you just press enter, and what that last little bit is, and you might get it, it takes anything that's bigger or potentially bigger, and it makes a spot for it. It'll actually put a 0 there. I have nothing bigger than that. But what this did was go through and see how many temperatures were less than 9, less than 19, and so on. And here they are. 2 from 0 to 9, 5, 8, 4, and 1. So we have a frequency distribution. And this used to be something that was really irritating when we had to do this without a computer, because then you had to list them in order. You ever try and make an ordered list? Any numbers? You find the smallest. You go down, well, damn, there's another smaller one. All right, you're always screwing around. With this stuff, no problem. All right, now, and this is just to be doing it, I'm going to take and mark the temperature data. All I need is the numbers. And I'm going to put them in here because I want to sort them and check the frequencies. So I go copy here, and we'll go here. We just need a spot, and paste it. You can move anything around in Excel. You can copy it. The advantage of going somewhere else is so you don't corrupt the original information. Right? Now, these are marked already because I just copied them. But if I hadn't, all I do is mark them. And now I'm going to sort them. And this is something Excel does wonderfully well. And if you look up on the far right side, there is sort and filter. We've only got one column we want to sort. So if we click in here, it's going to do a variety of things. First, if you click here, it goes smallest to largest, largest to smallest. The custom sort we're going to use later. That's when we've got 2 columns or more that we want to sort. And you have to tell it which one you want to sort on. For this, all we do is sort smallest to largest. And there is the sorted list, smallest to largest. So how many do we have that are 9 or less? You got it sorted? You see it? 2, which matches our, hopefully, our frequency. Between 10 and 19, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And in our frequency distribution, there's 5. Right? So the frequency command gives you the frequencies. You don't have to sort or anything. You can check it if you want by going smallest to largest. And you might use the sort for other things. This will sort anything, even if it's A, B, C, D. So here is our frequency distribution. So I'm going to take these numbers here, 2, 5, down to 1. And here's where things get tricky. We want to copy these. Go up to copy. We got them in there, and then I'm going to go here, and I'm going to paste them. Now, if I just paste, it's going to try and bring those formulas with it, and it'll screw it up. And I'll do that. Paste. It doesn't know what to do. It's trying to do the calculation that it had here. So what I want to do is go to the top part, and in paste, go to the down arrow, and you can paste a variety of things. In particular, we want paste values. And this will copy whatever's in those cells and stick that value where I tell it to go. So if I paste values, there's my frequency distribution. This is the class, and here's the frequency. And that's it. And if I add these up, and if you look back up here on the far right, there's a sigma that it's a Greek letter S. Looks like an E. If you click on that arrow next to it, these are the automatic commands. And automatically, I can get the sum, I can get the average, I can count, I can get the min, I can get the max. If I am in the cell below the list, and I click on sum, it does the sum formula for the cells above it. I could have gone to this cell and said equals sum, and then mark those things. The automatic command does it for you. Just press enter, and I get 20, which is what I should get, because I've got 20 observations. And these automatic commands aren't particular to frequency or anything. You got a list of numbers, you want the average, go to the bottom, click on the automatic command where the sum is, say average, and bang, you got an average. All right, and we'll do those later. So the only thing that's particular to frequency distributions is frequency. All the rest of it is just commands. Now we need other kinds of frequency. This is how often does it occur. Relative frequency is what percent of the time. Like this one is going to be 2 out of 20, or 0.1. 10% of the time, it's in that class. The way to calculate this, the easy way, is go to that first cell. Do equals, and then we want to divide whatever's in this cell by the contents of that cell. So if we click on the 2, and we get the cell reference to that cell. Whatever's in that cell is H11. It's got a name, it's got a spot, and we're taking whatever's in that spot and we're putting it in there. Then we're going to divide, and that's just the slash. And then we're going to divide that by whatever is in the cell with our total. Click OK or Enter, and we get 0.1. Right? And relative frequency can be decimals, it can be percent, whatever. It's just which way do you want to show it. Now for the rest of them, I want to copy this cell calculation down through the others. Right? And here, I've got this highlighted. Look right there on the right-hand corner, lower right-hand corner, there's a little box. If you go to that little box, put the cursor on it, you will get a plus sign. If you go just to the edge, you'll get this arrow sign. That means move it. Going to that with the plus sign, I press down on the mouse button and just drag it down. So I have cleverly copied the contents of that cell divided by the contents of that cell to the rest of these, and what happened? It's a divide by 0. Look at the contents. Look at the contents of that cell, the calculation. It's H11 divided by H16. The next one down should be H12. But it's divided by H17, which is this cell, which has a 0 in it. Because when you copy, it takes the cell reference and adjusts it. So instead of H16, I need to lock the cell reference so that it always divides by that 20. All right, to do this in Excel, go to the H16. Right? And this is history. The guy who invented the spreadsheet, I think it was SuperCalc was the first one. He had an IBM Selectric typewriter. You ever see a typewriter? An IBM Selectric had this little ball and banged itself to death. Worked really well. So all he had at his command was an old typewriter setup. So he had to use what was on that keyboard. So if we go between the H and the 16 and we put in a $sign, that says if I copy this calculation to anything else, it will go to whatever the column is, but it will always stay in row 16. The $sign locks the cell reference. I could do this by putting a $sign in front of the H. Now, no matter where I copy this calculation, it will use whatever's in cell H16. It's locked. I don't need to screw with the column because I'm always going to be in that column. Right? But it doesn't hurt. So now, my calculation in this one is the same, but now I have locked the 20. It's always going to divide by that 20. If I go to the cell again and get the plus sign, push the button down, and now in the second position, it's H12 divided by H16. That 20 is stuck there. And this shows the relative frequency. 10% of the time, the number is in that box, that class. 25% of the time, it's between 10 and 19. 40% in here. 20% in there, and 5% in there. Right, so this is the decimal version of the frequency. And by screwing around with these things, I can make it a percentage. I just change the format. It's up here in the number box. We'll do that some other time. But in this, these are the probabilities of these temperatures. And they have to add to 1. And it does, because I took 20 divided by 20 for this last cell here. Or I can just sum them up. Let me get rid of the 1. Now I've got a blank cell there. I want the sum of the numbers above it, and I want to go back to that automatic command. At the bottom of the list, go to the sum sign, press the arrow, and I want sum. And I get 1. That is relative frequency. It is just frequency on a percentage or decimal basis. So, frequency, relative frequency, this is just another version of that. The next two are different versions of frequency, but they're still based on this stuff. Cumulative frequency is these numbers successively added. And the way to do this is go to that cell. We want the 2 because that's the only one we got. So if we do equals and 2, whatever's in that cell now goes in there. Our next one is going to be 2 plus 5. The next one's going to be 2 plus 5 plus 8, and so on. All right. This is an easy way to do these commands. Go to that cell, and we want to add this to that. 2 plus 5. So it equals this plus the 5. All right, so now I've got whatever's here, I'm going to add it to that, and that sum is going to appear there. Now, if I copy this cell down, just like before, go into the corner, get the plus sign, and I copy this cell down, it takes this plus this, puts it there. Then this plus that puts it there. Then this plus that and puts it there. Right? Excel will do, you can do this the hard way. You can say, add these up. Or this is just a shorthand calculation that's used for a lot of things. Whenever I've got to use this cell, then the next one over there. Put it here. Then get that one and that one. Put it over here. So this is 2 plus 5 is 7. Then 7, whatever's here, plus that goes there. It's just a shorthand version of doing these things. All right? And the total at the end should be 20. How many of the temperatures were below 29? Here's 29. 15 of them are 29 or below. 19 of them are 39 and below. So this is from here up. This is just that. So that's cumulative frequency. Just add them up. How about relative frequency? Cumulative relative frequency. What's that going to be?
Just like a percentage.
Just like the percentage. I'm just going to add up that plus that. Then those two plus that, then those two plus that. And I can do it the same way as before. Equals whatever the first one is, goes in there. So equals this plus that. And I get 35. Now if I go to the corner, pull it down, I get them added up. So here, it's like, how many people have 3 or fewer pets? And I can look on the cumulative frequency and find that. How many temperatures are less than 29? 15. What percent of temperatures are less than 29? That's 75%. So all of these are different versions of exactly the same thing. And if I have any one of them, I can go back through and calculate it. So what you mostly see for frequency distributions is the relative frequency, because this has the total number in it. If I've got 200 or 2,000, this changes. The relative frequency is going to be very much the same, regardless of how many I've got. Right? And this has to add to 20, that has to add to 1. Let's plot. We're going to make a bar graph of these things. I'm going to mark the frequency, insert, and go to charts. Click on the bar chart. I want a 2D. And there is the relative frequencies. Temperatures in the middle are much more common than the ones on the side. And I can change the chart title. This is frequency. And I can make it smaller, larger, and put it somewhere. That's frequency. If I did relative frequency, it would look the same. Because it's the same thing, the y-axis would be labeled differently, is all. So do that. Plot relative frequency. Make a bar graph for relative frequency. Right? And you have very little control over where these things show up. Right? You say you want a bar graph, you tend to be in this spot on the page, it'll put it in the middle. If you want it somewhere in particular, you have to move it there. So change the title. This is relative frequency. Quency. So I have relative frequency. I'm going to make it smaller and just move it. Whoop, didn't want to do that. So here's relative frequency, and they're the same graph. I just changed the y-axis. If I go to cumulative frequency, I'm going to make a chart, a bar graph, for cumulative frequency. Insert bar, and here you can see how it adds up. This actually has a name. It's called an ogive. Frequency is how often. Relative frequency is a percentage of how often, or a decimal. Cumulative frequency gives you this ogive. And if I did cumulative relative frequency, I'd get the same graph with a different y-axis. So those are all the things that I can do with frequency. But the main deal is, how do you use the frequency command? Right? And if you ever don't remember, look it up. Type in XL frequency, and there will literally be 100 different explanations for frequency. Let's finish this one. These are frequency distributions. It's got classes and the numbers that fall into each class. Down here at the bottom is histogram page. And we just made a histogram in this one. This is a histogram. It's a plot of the frequency. Right, so a histogram is just a plot of frequency. This is a little different deal here. This is cubic feet per second for the New River at Radford. So this is cubic feet per second at Radford over a month. But I want to see what this looks like. So I have it with the class limits 1001 to 1500, 1501 to 2000, and so on. Right. One thing in this, when you're making a frequency distribution, all of your class widths should be the same. If you see a frequency distribution with different widths, somebody is trying to bury a detail. Here are the class boundaries. I have decimals so that, and I don't have to use this, but I've got 1000.6 as the lower boundary for this class. And it goes to 1500.5. The next one goes from 1500.6 to 2000.5. Right, so anything bigger than 1500.5, like 1500.51, goes in the next class. So these are the class boundaries. This is what you're going to see in the table. This is what the calculations actually have to deal with. And I'm going to put a frequency in here. And I'm going to use these class boundaries, the upper class boundaries, as the bins for XL. Go ahead and make a frequency distribution. You remember how? Mark the data. Don't do anything else. Do equals FRE. Frequency comes up. Double click. and it tells you what it wants to do. Data array and bins array. Data array first. Here's our data on this side. Comma. Then I need the bins array. And this happens a lot of times. The command steps on what you're trying to do. So you got to kind of trick it sometimes or move it. But if I do this, kind of snuck up underneath it. So I've got H18, which is, I want H17, don't I? I just used the shift arrow. So I've got marked from here to here. There's ways around making the frequency command jump on your data. But it happens. You have to deal with it. So here's my data. B16 to B46. The bins are H17 to H28. Enter. And there is the frequency of cubic feet per second for the new river at Radford. Now I want to make a histogram. And the histogram is just the bar chart for the frequency. I just made 3 of them or 4 of them on the other page. I go to Insert, Bar Chart, and there is the bar chart, and this is going to be cubic feet per second. You can make it more elaborate than that. Yep, got that one a little wrong. So most of the time, there's nothing happening here. It's just kind of going along. Here is the last time it flooded. You ever see those pictures of Radford? They got parking lots that flood. We're sitting right on the river. The river comes up, water comes up. So this happens. It doesn't happen very often, but this is the extreme. Now, at the bottom here of this, I have the sequence number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 on up. I want to put something in there that means something, that's more of an indicator. So I'm going to get a class midpoint. And in here, and there's lots of ways to get class midpoints. All right. Sometimes you average the successive lower limits. Add 1,001 to 1,501 and then divide by 2. And if I did that, what would I get? 2, I would get 1,251. Or I can average these two. Right? What I want is something that represents that class, rather than a particular calculation. And there's lots of advice on how to do that. I want the middle of that. 1250 is as good a middle as I can get. I want to increase this by 500 every time, so the next one goes to 1750. The next one, and so on. Right? I can just type them in there. But here is another useful command. I've got this blocked, and I've got a number to start with. Go up there. And you see that little down arrow? Click on the arrow beside that. And this is the fill command. And I could fill down, right, up, left. If I just said fill, it would take that 1250 and put it in all of these things. It's just a shorthand way to get numbers in. What I want to do is a series. And here, I'm in a column, and it's got a step value. And I want to go in steps of 500. This stop value, I've never figured out what this is supposed to do, because it doesn't stop anything. If I said stop at 1300, it just ignores it and fills the rest of it in. So if you ever figure out what it does, let me know. But when I click OK, there is my midpoints, right down the line. And I want to replace this with the midpoints. All right, and we've already done this with other things, other graphs, the bar graphs. So we can do it, we'll do it next time. We're